Hey guys, this is Laurent Caniciani or Bonaparte 333 on the Procreate community. I wanted to do commented time lapse on this drawing for a specific reason to talk about styluses mainly. Why do like a voiceover over a drawing instead of a nice full-fledged painting? Well, this was a different kind of project that I had to do where this was a commission piece for friends. They wanted to have like an old school home sweet home illustration to hang in their apartment, and I had two main characters who would represent them, I guess. And one was an otter pony mix and queen at that, and the other one was eagle canine sort of king character. So that was the only thing that was, basically asked to be in the picture, and I can do whatever I wanted. So I jumped at the chance to do animal drawings, which I love, and they're always fun to do. I didn't have a lot of time, so I knew I was gonna rely on some photographic references, especially since, like I was trying to give expressions to these characters, and I weren't all that familiar with some of the anatomy of a horse's mouth, for instance. So that's where reference really comes in and helps. So another thing that I really wanted to do in on this project was to try and emulate basically like an old school, like really old school black and white inked illustration. And by that I mean not so much etchings per se, like Gustave Doré, for instance, but more like the 30s style of. They had a lot of satirical caricature style inked drawings in periodicals. They would be political satire, they would be kind of caricatures where a lot of known people, for instance, celebrities or whatever, they would have like animal heads and stuff like that. There was a big trend of animal, anthropomorphized characters around that time. And they always had some very elaborate, specific kind of inking. There's so many ways you can ink. So these had very elaborate inking, a lot of cross hatching, a lot of lines overlapping, and I wanted to try and capture that in Procreate, and that was something I never tried before. I used to do a lot of inking when I was younger, and I tried many different styles of inking, very clean, definite lines, or much more textured, kind of dirty-ish line work, a little bit like I will do here. So I wanted to try and recreate that in Procreate. So to get that effect, of course, Procreate can do whatever you want, but to have the control, you need to have like a good stylus. And so I want to take this opportunity to talk a bit about styluses and different styluses that I had and their ups and downs. Just before we get into styluses, on this particular project, I also wanted to tackle it from a very classic point of view, which means that I basically made it pretty much in exactly the same way I would have made a traditional illustration. So I started with grayscale drawing, which probably was done with the 2B pencil, I guess. I always tweak the tools in Procreate that come with it, but I like the 2B pencil. I probably made the line wider. And I also wanted to do wanted to use that as another drawing, and I would do my inking over that. But the drawing helps me to get a richness of grays, of different tones of gray, so I can build on that later when I'm doing the ink work, and I don't have to think about how much, like the way you treat lines when you're inking. You can have a lot of information come from the underlying drawing, so you don't have to figure out, where you should have like closer knit together lines to get like, darker values and all that. I let all my grayscale drawing do that for me. So when I'm inking, I can really concentrate on using a good technique of inking and having fun instead of trying to figure out, how dark something should be, or how gray, because basically the effects of gray when you're inking come from how distant you place lines, closer or further away from each other. So yeah. As a little quick note, I'm on the crown of the dog there. I'm drawing like the fleur de lis, which is a symbol associated with royalty a lot, but it's also the symbol of the province of Quebec, in which I live in Canada, and it's a little nod to our national symbol there. So you can see here I'm starting the inking tests, and I did several lines. I tried different things, pre-made brushes that came with Procreate, but also ones I tweaked myself. I think I ended up using the ink bleed pretty much, but also like a squarish, oval, probably shaped brush, and having a bit of taper at the beginning of the stroke, and what else? Yeah, I think I used 2 or 3 different brushes. I'm not exactly sure which ones. Sorry about that. But you can definitely get a nice ink kind of effect as long as you have the size set to pressure sensitivity, and also you want to have a little rotational jitter to make the lines not perfectly straight. So that helps. So you can see here when I'm painting inking the dog's head, for instance, it's really useful to have those gray values underneath to gauge my lines with. So I can focus with the lines with the actual forms I'm trying to describe. I mean, there are so many ways to ink. You can have like really fill out areas where you can only have like a few lines, making a gradation effect. Like a lot of cartoons, superhero comics have that kind of inking really clean. Here I wanted to have like a lot of richness in the shades of gray once I would get rid of my background drawing. So this would be like, like on a white background, but still have lots of different nice effects of texture, and I'm focusing on having line work really follow the underlying forms. So if you have like a rounded area, you can have those lines really describe those forms. You want to be watchful of your shadows, where they are, and how much you want to get close to having a really complete, like a dark line or dark area. So moving on to the styluses. The first stylus I had was, I think now they call it the Pogo Sketch. It was like a really thin tube of metal with, it didn't even have the famous rubber tip at the time. It had like a sponge kind of material. And, it wasn't the best thing to draw with, but I did a lot of drawings with it, like on brushes at the time and then on Procreate. It was pretty small, the tip, so that was cool, but it wore out pretty fast though. But it was pretty much one of the only styluses available at the very beginning with the iPad 1. And then after that, I discovered the box wave styluses, which are much more common now. Bigger tube of metal and a big rubber tip, and I loved them at first. It was much better than the previous sketch, Pogo Sketch, because the rubber tip glides very well on the screen. But if you draw a lot with it, they lose their gliding ability pretty fast, and then they start to grab on the screen, and it's a gradual process. So I was finding myself getting annoyed with these things, for no apparent reason. And then I discovered when I bought a new one that it was really not gliding anymore on the screen, and I was fighting it all the time. So since these would wear out pretty fast, I mean, I would keep buying new ones, and I think I went through 5 or 6, once every 6 weeks maybe, a new one. So I also tried all the Jot Touch, the original one and the Jot Touch 4, and they had excellent control over line width and opacity, but they weren't the thing for me, I guess, because I got some scratches even if I kept my screen clean, and they were great for seeing what you draw with the plastic disc, but yeah, I had that scratches fear, and I kept looking for another solution. And so I tried the Pogo Connect, which, you know, had the rubber tip, which is pretty big, so you have to zoom in a lot to see what you're doing, but it's great pressure control. And I made a little fiber mesh sock over the tip, so with you know, the durable mesh from another Stylus, so it would last longer, and it helped a lot. So it wouldn't grip like the box wave rubber tips did with time. But still, the tip was pretty big. So I tried the Jaja too, but the Jaja, although it had great control, I kept having problems with the sound sensor, I guess, with the microphone, because I draw a lot in public places, cafes and stuff. There's a lot of sound, so, and still, you know, another plastic tip, you know, potential screen scratching stylus, so that didn't work out either that great. I tried the Sensu brush, which was great for, you know, having gestural strokes, and it really feels like you're painting on the surface. But the Sensu is not that great at having a lot of small strokes, like well, what I'm doing this here, for instance. It's not very specific or very precise. It's much more for having like broad strokes and things like that. And of course, you don't have any pressure sensitivity, which you don't need, but it's always nice to have. And then, of course, I tried the Wacom pen, which has, you know, a big rubber stylus, but the pressure sensitivity is very good. Similar to the Pogo Connect though, but if you use the Teflon tips that are made for the Jaja as replacement tips, and you customize it with the creative stylus from Wacom, it gives you like a really good control over what you're seeing and pressure sensitivity. So for me, for now, that's the best, you know, best of both worlds until something better comes along. So I really recommend it to you guys if you haven't tried it out already. So that's it. If you're on a budget, well, I recommend getting either a Sensu brush if you want to have something, you know, for a lot of very artistic strokes, or you can get a regular, you know, like rubber tip box wave stylus, and they last for a little while, but you know, you can get them anywhere, and they're pretty good for most work. If you have the budget, you know, and you want a pressure sensitive stylus, I would get the Wacom one, and if you can get some of these replacement tips, they're really worth it. They're a little difficult to get, but they're really worth it. And that's it. Final note on this document, it was a pretty big size to get a lot of crispy detail, so when it comes out printed, it looks really well. It looks like real, you know, ink on paper. So I was really happy with that. And I had lots of fun doing it, and lots of control, and again, you can do anything in Procreate. You're limited by your imagination only. So this is Laurent Canichoni. I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you next time.